In 1586, a woman laid crushed beneath 700 lay of stone. Hour 1, her ribs cracked like kindling. Hour 12, she was still singing hymns. Hour 48, physicians checked her pulse, still strong. Hour 72, she finally died. And when she did, she changed the law forever. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part, they had a medical manual, specifically designed to keep her conscious through every single second. A queen personally wrote instructions demanding this execution last 3 full days. By the time she died, this woman had accidentally triggered the biggest religious uprising in English history. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this execution was so brutal that historians tried to bury the records. You'll see why modern Supreme Court justices still cite this case, and you'll discover the identity of the person who ordered these specific torture protocols, someone you definitely recognize from history class. But first, smash that subscribe button because when I show you what they did on Hour 48, you're going to need to see next week's video about the 3 execution methods that were worse than this one. This is the story of Margaret Clio, and this is how one execution changed everything. March 1586, York, England. Margaret Clio is standing trial for treason. But here's the thing nobody tells you. She isn't a spy. She isn't an assassin. She isn't a political revolutionary. Margaret's crime, she hid Catholic priests in her home. That's it. In Protestant England under Queen Elizabeth, that single act carried a death sentence. Now you're probably thinking, okay, this is tragic. But people were executed for religious crimes all the time back then. What makes her different? Here's what makes her different. When they brought Margaret to trial, she did something absolutely unthinkable. She refused to enter a plea. Not guilty. Not even guilty. Nothing. Complete silence. And under English law, if you refuse to plead, there is no trial. No witnesses can be called. Which meant her children, yes, her children couldn't be forced to testify against her. She had found a legal loophole that would protect her family. But the courts had a loophole too. A brutal one. Peine forte et dure, punishment hard and severe. If you refused to plead, they would press you under stones until you either entered a plea or died. Simple as that. Most people lasted 15 to 20 minutes before their ribs caved inward and punctured their lungs. Quick, relatively merciful by medieval standards, Margaret's execution was supposed to follow this same protocol. 15 minutes, maybe 30 if she was stubborn. The executioners prepared the usual equipment, a wooden board, smooth river stones, leather straps. But then something happened that had never happened before in English execution history. New orders came down from London. Written orders, specific orders, orders that included exact weight measurements, precise time intervals, and most chillingly, medical supervision requirements. Someone wanted Margaret Clio to suffer longer than any execution victim in recorded history. But here's what nobody tells you about who gave those orders. We'll get to that in a moment. First, you need to understand exactly what they did to her. Here's where this story transforms from tragic to absolutely nightmarish. The executioners received a document, and yes, this document still exists in the British archives that reads like a medical procedure manual because that's exactly what it was. Standard pressing protocol, pile stones on the victim's chest until the weight becomes fatal. Duration 15-30 minutes. Margaret's protocol, something entirely different. They started with just 50 lbs across her chest. Not enough to kill, barely enough to restrict breathing. Then, and this is documented in court records, they added weights in 15-minute intervals. 50 lbs, then 75, then 100. But here's the detail that makes your blood run cold. A physician stood beside her the entire time, not to help her, to monitor her pulse, to make sure she remained conscious, to calculate the exact maximum weight her body could sustain without immediate death. Imagine you're lying there. You feel the first stones lowered onto your chest. Breathing becomes work, then more weight. Your ribs flex inward, more weight. You taste blood, more weight. Your vision tunnels. But you can't pass out because they've calibrated everything to keep you conscious. Hour 1, Margaret is screaming. The crowd gathered outside the toll booth where they're executing her. This is public. This is meant to be a warning. Hour 3, her ribs crack. The sound is audible to witnesses. They document it like green wood breaking. Hour 6. She stops screaming, but she hasn't lost consciousness. She's praying out loud in Latin. Hour 12. The physician checks her. Pulse again. Still strong. They add another 100 lb. The medical precision here is horrifying. They weren't just executing her. They were conducting an experiment in human endurance. How long can a human body survive crushing? How much pain can consciousness withstand? By hour 24, something unprecedented happens. Members of the crowd start asking questions. Why is this taking so long? Who ordered this? This isn't justice. This is torture. Remember that detail, the crowd's questions, because it becomes crucial later. But here's what I haven't told you yet. The absolute worst part of this entire nightmare. The executioners aren't making these decisions on their own. They're following orders, specific orders, written orders, orders that came directly from the Queen of England herself. Don't click away yet, because what I'm about to show you is a historical document that most people have never seen, and it reveals exactly how personal this execution was. I know this is getting incredibly dark, but if you're still watching, you're clearly as fascinated by history's brutal truths as I am. These stories matter because they show us how far we've come and how fragile human rights really are. Make sure you're subscribed, because next week, I'm revealing 3 execution methods that were somehow worse than pressing. One of them took 17 days. Yes, 17. Now, let's talk about Queen Elizabeth I and why she wanted Margaret Clio to suffer. Here's the historical document that changes everything we know about this execution. In the British National Archives, there's a letter dated March 1586. It's from the Privy Council, Queen Elizabeth I's advisors to the York authorities, and it contains handwritten notes in the margins. Elizabeth's handwriting. The printed text orders Margaret's execution. Standard stuff, but the margin notes, they're terrifying. No less than 3 days duration. Public witness essential. Maintain consciousness throughout. Elizabeth didn't just approve this execution. She designed it. She specified the duration. She demanded Margaret remain conscious. She wanted this to be a spectacle that would terrify every Catholic in England into submission. But here's what nobody tells you about why Elizabeth made this so personal. Margaret wasn't just any Catholic. She was a butcher's wife, middle class, respected in York. She ran a successful business. She had 8 children. She was exactly the kind of person Elizabeth needed to make an example of, someone ordinary citizens could relate to. The message was clear. If we'll do this to a respectable mother and businesswoman, imagine what we'll do to you. Elizabeth had been excommunicated by the Pope. In 1570, Catholic priests entering England were declared traitors, and people like Margaret, people who hid these priests, were considered enemy agents. This wasn't just religious persecution. In Elizabeth's mind, this was national security. So, she crafted an execution that would be talked about for generations, a deterrent so brutal that no one would dare help a Catholic priest again. But here's the twist Elizabeth never saw coming. Margaret Clio was about to weaponize her own execution in a way that would backfire spectacularly. Because what happened during those 72 hours didn't terrify people into submission. It did the exact opposite. Our 36 Margaret is still conscious, and she's singing, not screaming, not begging, singing hymns in Latin, over and over the same verses about salvation and resurrection. The crowd outside has swelled to nearly 300 people. This is the biggest public gathering in York in years. But something strange is happening. The mood is shifting. Our 48 Margaret's voice is weaker now. Her lungs are collapsing. But witnesses document that she's still singing, still praying. And now members of the crowd are joining her. Protestant citizens, Elizabeth's subjects. They're singing along with Catholic hymns. The executioners panic. This isn't how this was supposed to go. This was supposed to inspire fear. Not this. Not sympathy, not admiration. Our 55. A Protestant alderman, a city official, demands they stop. This has gone too far. He tells the executioners, "End it now." Can't. They have orders from the Queen. 3 days, minimum. Hour 60. Margaret's pulse is weakening. The physician reports she's finally losing consciousness. They add more weight to keep her alert. 700 lb total now. Her chest has caved inward by 3 in. But here's what nobody tells you, and this is documented in multiple eyewitness accounts. Even as her body was failing, Margaret used her last conscious moments to do something extraordinary. She forgave her executioners out loud by name. "I forgive you, John Fawcett. I forgive you, Thomas Ward. This is not your sin. It is the sin of those who command you." Let's imagine you're one of those executioners. You've just spent 3 days slowly crushing a woman to death, and she forgives you. She acknowledges you're just following orders. She places the moral responsibility exactly where it belongs, on the people who designed this torture. Hour 72. March 25th, 1586. 3:47 p.m. Margaret. Cleo dies. The crowd is silent. No cheers, no satisfaction, just silence. And then someone starts clapping slowly. Then another person. Then another. They're applauding her. A standing ovation for a condemned traitor. The executioners scrambled to disperse the crowd. Too late. Something has fundamentally shifted in York. Elizabeth wanted to create fear. She created a martyr instead. By hour 60, even the executioners themselves were begging the authorities to end it. But here's what nobody tells you about what happened in the days and weeks after Margaret's death. Because this is where the execution that was supposed to save Protestant England nearly destroyed it. Within 48 hours of Margaret's death, York is in chaos. Protestant citizens are demanding answers. Why did that take 3 days? Who authorized that? That wasn't an execution. That was murder. The city council tries to suppress the story. Too late. News spreads across England. Pamphlets circulate. Yes, they had viral media in the 1500s. It just took longer. And every retelling makes Margaret more heroic and Elizabeth more monstrous. Here are the documented consequences, and they're staggering. Within 2 weeks, 300 Protestant residents of York formally convert to Catholicism. 300. They cite Margaret's execution as the reason. The thing that was supposed to scare people away from Catholicism drove them toward it. Within 6 months, Elizabeth's advisors are panicking. The execution has become a propaganda disaster. Catholic countries are using it as evidence of English barbarity. Even Protestant allies are uncomfortable. Within 3 years, 1589, English Parliament passes new execution reform laws. For the first time in English history, there are legal limits on execution duration. The law specifically states that all executions must result in swift dispatch, and that prolonged torture under guise of lawful punishment is hereby forbidden. That law written directly because of Margaret. Cleo becomes the foundation for humane execution standards across Europe. It's cited in the French legal reforms of the 1790s. It influences the American Constitution's 8th Amendment, prohibiting cruel and unusual punishment. One woman's 72 hours of suffering literally rewrote Western legal philosophy. But here's the detail that makes this story even more powerful. In 1970, almost 400 years later, the Catholic Church officially canonizes Margaret Cleo as a saint. Today, the site of her execution in York is a pilgrimage destination. Thousands of people visit every year, and Queen Elizabeth III's her execution order is preserved in the British archives as evidence of cruel excess, and is frequently cited in modern death penalty debates. In 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court cited the Margaret Cleo case in a ruling about execution protocols. Her name appears in legal briefs arguing against prolonged pharmaceutical executions. Her suffering from 1586 is still shaping law today. The execution that was supposed to terrorize people into submission became the execution that proved tyranny always contains the seeds of its own destruction. Elizabeth wanted to demonstrate absolute power. Instead, she demonstrated that there are things more powerful than absolute power. Human dignity, defiance in the face of injustice, the refusal to break. Margaret Cleo discovered something that every authoritarian regime eventually learns. You can destroy a person's body, but if they refuse to let you break their spirit, you lose. The executioners thought they were crushing a woman. They accidentally crushed an entire system of legal brutality. So let me ask you a question. Could you remain conscious and defiant for 72 hours? Could you sing hymns while your ribs were shattering? Could you forgive the people torturing you? Most of us want to believe we could be that brave. But Margaret Cleo wasn't born heroic. She was a butcher's wife who made a choice to protect her faith and her family. And when that choice led to unimaginable suffering, she made another choice to not let them break her spirit. That's the real lesson here. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear make your choices for you. Don't click away yet, because here's the modern connection that makes this story matter right now. In 2024, there are still debates about execution protocols, about how much suffering is acceptable when the state takes a life, about whether prolonged consciousness during execution constitutes torture. And in those debates, lawyers and judges still reference Margaret Clither's 72 hours. Her suffering set a legal precedent that we're still using to define the boundaries of state power. One woman, 3 days, 4 centuries of legal reform. So here's my question for you. And I want you to really think about this before you answer in the comments. If you knew your suffering could change history, could rewrite laws, could protect future generations, would you have the courage to endure it? Drop your answer below. And if this story affected you the way it affected me, hit that subscribe button because next week, I'm covering 3 execution methods that somehow lasted even longer than Margaret's. 1 of them took 17 days and involved the victim performing surgery on himself. You won't want to miss it. This has been the story of Margaret Cleo, the woman who turned her execution into a revolution. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.